Hello, Salem and Kaiser, and welcome to another edition of the Senior Symposium. Today's show is going to deal with confronting elder stress and depression. And we have with us, first of all, I want to share this. Is the glass half empty or half full? It all depends on attitude, and that's what we're going to explore today. So let me put this down and introduce our panel. Starting on the far left, we have Kate Morris, retired psychiatric nurse, originally from New York.
Originally, but in Alaska for 35 years.
Alaska,
So.
she's cooled, chilled out a bit.
That's right.
And we have our own Kanta Luthra, is a consumer at large, and she is a native of Punjab in India. And our specialist here is Robert Schiff. Robert is a psychologist, and he works for Kaiser Permanente, but he represents his own opinions here today. We want to have the disclaimer so you don't get fooled by this. I'm Lee Coyne, Lee Coyne, your host here, and what we're going to do is we're going to ask them about how stress plays a part in our life, and as we age, as we all are, how it trickles down to our sense of reality. Let's start with Kate. I'd like you to each give your thoughts about what stress means to you, and then we'll end up with Robert giving us the official version of stress and anxiety in terms of the psychology view.
What
stress means to you?
Means to you? Mean personally or?
Yes.
Well, I mean, many things can be very stressful. I think one term to use as you get older, it's loss. Where it be much when you're younger, there are many other things that cause you stress, right? Your job and your education and that sort of thing. But as you grow older, I think that's what I would say is the main thing. Many losses that you've never even thought about would happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there are many ways to take care of stress, which I'm sure you'll get into.
Definitely.
But it can cause sleeplessness. Certainly, anxiety is part of stress, which I think is one of the worst emotions there is. Actually,
Push the delete button. Delete.
Yeah.
And sleeplessness sometimes.
Sleeplessness, yes, definitely. That and the way people take care of it can add more stress rather than less. Also, so
That's right.
I think.
Kanta, what are your thoughts about how stress? What's your definition, first of all, of how stress plays out?
Stress, I don't know, that could be like anxiety build-up and not to be sure of yourself as when you're young, you're pretty much in power of yourself, but then your body starts to weaken. And you think you can do stuff that you did as a young person, but then your body doesn't respond. And sometimes memory issues. And so there are several things as you grow older, it just adds to I think it's like anxiety syndrome.
Yeah. Layers of stress and all.
Yeah.
Rob, tell us about stress from the official definition. P.S.
I'm not sure I'm going to give the official definition,
but
it does.
Unofficial.
It does take various forms, and that's important to realize. And some of that has been mentioned already. It can take a toll on our body through illness, aches and pains. It can take a toll on our emotions, depression, anxiety. It can take a toll on our social life through withdrawal.
Right.
Very true.
Less interaction. As Kate said, I think one of the major causes of stress really is loss, and as people age, there's more loss in their life, and we can kind of break that down into several areas.
Let's do it.
Okay, well, there's also loss and fear of loss. They go together. So the first might be physical. People do get ill as they get older. They lose function, but they're also afraid of getting ill, and a lot of times they worry about that, and there's a kind of a preoccupation often with physical kinds of problems or potential problems.
I can see it.
There's financial concerns also. People are worried about loss of income or loss of ability to do the kinds of things that they've done in the past. There's loss of social involvement. We talked about that. Friends move away. Friends sometimes die. And often that's not replaced adequately. And so there's various kinds of loss that people feel. One of the areas I'm very much involved in is people concerned about loss of memory. We hear so much these days about Alzheimer's and what have you.
Yeah.
And I can just say a word or two about that if you'd like me to at this time.
Let's mention it.
Okay. Well, one of the things is that people, as we get older, while we still remember almost as much, we can't recall it as quickly. So it might be one of those things when you know that you know something, but you just can't sum it up the way you'd like to.
Access the data file.
Yeah, and it takes a while, and I'm sure everyone has experienced this idea that they can't think of it at the time, but later
Yeah,
on it kind of
right.
pops into their
Yeah.
head.
Right.
Well,
right.
that's normal aging. I mean,
Well-
and many times people are scared that
Yeah.
that's a beginning of Alzheimer's, but
Right,
it's really
exactly.
normal aging.
Well, I know that I could remember most of the play, like Othello or Shakespeare's, you know, King Lear. And now I feel sometimes I want to retrieve a word. It haunts me for a long time, but I can't come up with it.
Do you find that sometimes later on it just
Yeah,
pops
it
into
just
your
pops
head?
up. Or somebody's name that you've known for so long, and
Yeah.
it's right there,
Right.
but it doesn't come
Right.
to the tip of your tongue.
I know
Kant
some,
is a former teacher of literature at Chemeketa.
Yeah.
So you're
sometimes I like to watch Jeopardy, and I think
Yeah.
they should have Jeopardy for older people
Yeah,
because
right.
you know it, but it just takes longer to retrieve it.
Those
And
buttons
it's
need to
very
be a little
annoying.
slower.
slow motion Jeopardy. Hear that, America? That's the next program in the
It's,
tubes.
You remember something that happened 20 years back, but you don't remember something that is yesterday.
Right.
And so that is also sometimes stressful.
And I found myself that it'll be one thing I won't remember, like one thing. Like I remember in Alaska. Now I was not probably that old then, but this magpie used to come and sit on the deck. I could never remember the name magpie, which
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it's just certain things that block. So then I thought, well, I'll pretend there's an apple pie sitting up there.
Yeah.
And once I made that kind of trick
Association.
for
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah.
I didn't forget magpie. So
Yeah.
I try to do that now if I absolutely, like, repeatedly forget
That's a good
the
strategy.
name of
Yeah.
something. which-
Let me mention another problem that sometimes causes memory problem, and that's a reversible problem, and that can be a physical problem. Sometimes an
Nutrition.
infection, for example,
Yeah.
can cause a temporary kind
Definitely.
of fuzziness
Yeah.
in thinking. Sometimes a medication. People are taking medication, and it kind of clouds their mind a little bit, and that can also
Right.
cause some problems. And sometimes there's some imbalance that can, chemical imbalance in your
Stress
body
them out.
that can also be remedied once it's diagnosed. So again, a lot of people get scared that as soon as they can't remember something, that means it's Alzheimer's, and that's not always the case.
And that generates fear in itself.
Absolutely.
The fear of the unknown
Yes.
Absolutely.
is a stressor.
I think I don't know about men, I bet they feel that way too.
You know a little bit about men.
Yeah, well, I was thinking that as you grow older, you're not your young self, you know. You look in the mirror,
Yeah, right.
and
Th-
there's this
there's your
woman
mother.
who has encroached your body.
Mirror, mirror on the wall, who used to be the fairest of them
Seems
all.
like somebody has taken your body, your face, and you look at who is
Who dat?
that
Who dat?
person?
And I don't know if you find a lot of people do that in their mind they still think they're
Yeah, right,
young and they
yeah.
still think they can do the things that they
Yeah,
Exactly.
until you actually try to do it a little
Yeah.
bit, then you realize your
Yeah.
body.
Isn't that called
is just
delusions
not the
of
same.
pediatric grandeur or something like that?
It's not grandeur like when you're young, you just stand up and you are up.
Oh, I know. And now if I sit very long, it's like,
And as you still think
Uh-huh.
that you can do it.
that's right.
But when you try to get up, oh
Right.
my God, somebody
Right.
else.
That's the
Yeah.
aches and the
Tells you.
pains that
Tunnel
naturally
people.
come. And
Yeah.
a lot of people have trouble coping with that.
Right.
They,
Yeah.
they really
Panel
do.
people, I want to do some focus on the different kind of physical ailments that Rob brought up and differentiate them. Let's start with the ability to walk and losing your ability to walk, having to transfer to a walker, a wheelchair, ambulate, and how does that affect your stress, that kind of adjustment? Any thoughts on that?
Sure. Independence is really important to
Yeah.
people. And the more your mobility is kind of restricted, the more you feel like you're giving up some of your independence. And that's very troubling
Scary.
for a lot of people, scary for a lot of people. And it's a hard adjustment sometimes. It's what we're talking about, that people don't want to accept that now they have more limitations, although they can still do many, many things. And life is not closed to them because of that. But people often feel like, well, now this is the beginning of the end, or this is really going to restrict my life, and that's not the way it has to be. But mobility is an issue. One of the things that can help, though, let me just mention this,
Yes.
is keeping physically active.
Yeah.
And it's one of the three things that's really essential for good aging. Physical activity, good sleep, and proper nutrition.
Nutrition,
Right,
right.
exactly.
Yeah.
But people don't realize that even if you're restricted, you can still do some sort of exercise. Even if you're restricted to a chair, you can do exercise with your arms. You can do all kinds of things.
Let me mention to you something that happened about maybe 30 years ago. I was working at a senior center in Queens, Rochdale Village Senior Center, my first social work job. And pretty soon we started getting a group of people with wheelchairs. They started out being healthy and they declined a little bit. And I wanted to come up with something that they could enjoy and get some pleasure out of life. We came up with the idea of calling a group Big Wheels, and they played soccer with balloons and wheelchairs.
Good,
And that
good.
was what did it. Maybe we could do it here in Salem.
Yeah.
Who knows? Big Wheels, here we come.
Let me just add one thing, then
Yes.
I'll give
Yeah,
you a chance.
please.
One of the things that has been found is even people who are quite elderly, strength training can be very helpful in terms of preventing falls.
Yes.
For example,
Yeah.
if you keep some sort of muscle tone, if you trip or whatever, you're not quite as likely to fall as you would otherwise if your muscles are really weak. So it's a really good idea for people to try to the extent they can and to within their limitations to be as active as they can.
Yeah. I was going to say that I have a little dog, a Pomeranian, and just taking him for a walk every day, twice a day, is both very energizing as well as stress reducing, because having a dog for by itself is like stress reduction.
Oh, yeah.
And then going in the morning when the birds are just starting to come out, the sun coming.
Reawakens you.
So that really kind of puts you at ease and takes away the stress level.
You're right.
And it's a good, walking is a good exercise as well.
I saw someone recently who lives in a park, and just walking to the mailbox, which
Right,
might be a block
exactly.
and back, is good exercise. in that
Yeah.
Kate, are you into any exercises?
Oh,
not
you
much.
know, I'm an avid golfer. Yes.
Oh, okay, that counts a lot.
Oh, yes. I've had problems with sciatica, and the one thing the doctor said is, do not stop playing golf. So I wasn't going to stop anyway. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the other thing doctors are really into. You've got to keep moving.
Yeah,
You've got to keep doing
Absolutely.
these things.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I've had physical therapy, and the one thing they've done that I think is really good is give me an exercise where you stand on one leg for a minute and then the other leg, because your balance, when it goes, that's really hard.
Yeah.
Then you start the fear of falling, and of course, when you fall, when you're older, it can be very traumatic. I know I've known many people who they were fine. They break a hip, and then it's like from then they just go
no.
down the hill. So to prevent that is good.
Kate, you probably know that falls are the number one expense for Medicare in the entire country. Falls and rehab.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know.
And a lot of times now they think maybe you break your hip then fall. So I think proper nutrition and movement and all that to keep those bones as strong as you can.
We may
is
do a
really
future show
important.
just on nutrition. It's a good
Well, let me
idea.
mention just real briefly about nutrition.
Yes.
It's really important for people, especially as you get older, to eat balanced meals with plenty of fruits and vegetables, to eat regularly, not to let long periods of time go without eating,
Including breakfast.
and also to limit some things that might be harmful for you, like too much alcohol, for example, that can be a problem, or even too much sugar.
I'll drink to
can be
none
a
alcohol.
problem. So,
Smoking certainly.
and certainly
Smoking,
smoking. We hope that a lot of people are now
Right.
giving up smoking,
Yeah.
but not enough.
I
Yeah.
hope.
Oh,
Yeah.
now that we're in summer and we're having rather sweaty days lately, maybe just walking in the mall can take the place of indoor exercise if your house gets
Summer
boring.
and winter. The Lancaster Mall opens early before the stores open, and people do mall walking.
Good.
Yeah.
Try it.
And right, and I forget how far it is to go all the way around, but
I'll bet it's quite a ways.
I think it is about 3 or 4 rounds, you know, like if that considers to be a mile. Yeah.
it's an excellent exercise. And you can look at the shops if you want to while you're walking
Sure.
Yeah,
past.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
And don't bring your wallet, right?
And you don't have to buy anything,
Yeah.
right? Exactly.
But that's what happens
Let's
when
talk
you are,
about the 5 senses also and how their loss or decline affects stress. We'll start with hearing. As a person loses their hearing, is there a certain kind of stress that's registered?
What happens is people get socially isolated. When you can't hear what other people are saying, you feel like you're not part of the conversation or
Cut
part
off.
of the group.
Cut off.
And people often are embarrassed to say too many times, "What did you say?" So they're just sort of, they really feel like they are in a corner in a way in terms of the conversation. Some people are embarrassed about getting hearing aids, even though these days they can be very small
Reagan
and
did.
unobtrusive. You know, that can be a problem. Hearing especially, but any kinds of diminishing of senses is
And
a problem.
vision is a big one, too.
Well, I just think it's miraculous what they can do now for cataracts. Used to be, years ago when I was first a nurse
Yes.
in training, when you had cataract, and they only did cataract surgery when it was desperate, like you were going to go blind. You had to lie still in a bed, flat on your back, for I believe it was 5 days.
Wow.
You had sandbags on each side, you had to be fed, everything. You just laid there.
Wow.
And now, I mean, to me, it's just miraculous, the changes that I've seen in a lot of these things. And of course, the age as we are at now. I think the average age used to be what, around
Yeah,
45 or 50 mid-century.
At
Yeah.
the turn of the 1900s, it was about 50 years
Oh,
old.
was it that?
Yeah.
47,
Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah.
And when 2000 approached a few years back, I believe it was something 83 or 84 for women, about 79 for men. Men always lag a little behind. We know that, right?
Yeah,
So-
us men.
I mean, we wear ourselves out chasing after our women, and then we run out of steam.
yeah. But lately,
Uh,
you know, I feel that women are doing a whole lot of things. They are working, they are taking care of their home, they are also doing social stuff. And so the stress level, I don't think, is less than the men have because our lifestyles have
Oh, it's
changed.
certainly
so-
not less. And
Yeah.
In fact, women have, as you've pointed out,
Yeah.
multiple roles, and that could
Right,
be more,
exactly.
including taking care of their husband who might be getting older and be ill
Right, right.
and what have you.
And then
Yeah.
you feel guilt about not doing enough, not covering all bases.
Yeah.
And that itself is
Mm-hmm.
stress incarnate.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like being somebody who is superwoman, you know. that
Right.
we all try to be sometimes,
Yeah.
and that's stressful.
I'm going to ask all of you, what misconceptions are there about stress that are floating around our society? What myths, what fuzzy ideas that
I think one of the big ones is that we're stuck with stress and that we can't do much about it.
I can't get my flypaper.
Right. And there are many ways we can relieve stress. Some people just feel like, well, this is my circumstances, and this is I have this problem or that problem, and that's the way it is. And that's not the case. People really can take some control over their life, and I think that's one of the big myths. And also, no matter how old you are, there's still things you can do in this world, and there's things you can look forward to, and there's things that can give your life meaning. And I think that's one of the big things that reduces stress in a person's life.
Okay.
I think it's important that people recognize their own response to stress, which is quite different in different individuals,
Yeah,
right? And that there are ways to cope with it. I agree with you, and it's going to be different for different people and how they cope. And it might, you might get very angry, you might get depressed, you've got to recognize, okay, this is what I'm responding to, and I'm responding to it this way, and then go to what can I do about this? I think that's extremely important, because there are ways that are, some of them very simplistic.
Right. I like to take
breathing
showers and baths.
exercises, and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And
Yeah, but sometimes it happens that it's not just stress, it's also depression. We haven't touched that.
We'll get to that in a
And
little
some
while.
of the stuff that happens to you, you don't have any control on it. It's not your doing, or you are not contributing to it, but circumstances
not-
happen that way,
right.
that you don't know how to cope with it.
Okay. Before we get into depression, and I appreciate you bringing it up, let's share our individual strategies for how we deal with our individual stress and what we found works for us and what does not. I'm going to start myself this time.
Go for it.
Okay. I love music, and I have a tape library, 150 audio tapes, the old-fashioned tape recorder styles, and I listen to relaxing music. Happen to like flute music, especially Ron Powell, some of the others, some
Galway.
Fear, and all. And I find that very relaxing. Also, I enjoy taking a shower or bath, just having the water trickle down and all, touch my pores. It's almost like a water cascade massage. And I guess massage in itself is a form of stress relief that people pay tons of money for in some cases. So that's my main formula. The thing that I don't like about myself is I have a weak spot for eating not just sweets, but stuff at salad bars and smorgasbords, and I think I have to learn to tame this tummy. That's the name of the new game, Tame This Tummy. And I like to kid around. Anyway, I think that sometimes the flip side of stress is overeating and overdoing a lot of other things.
Right, that's true.
What do you say, Rob?
Well, for myself, and I think for many people, one of the things that's really helpful is to have someone to talk with, to have a friend or someone you trust who you know is not going to be judgmental, who's a good listener.
Definitely.
And just to be able to kind of share, I think, is one good way to reduce stress in your life. But I also agree that relaxation, entertainment, finding laughter, doing things that make you laugh is also a good
Like
stress
listening to this
reliever.
program. A lot of laughs here.
So I think those are two important things to keep in mind. Sometimes people just don't do enough for fun in their life.
Yeah, that's
Conta's formula.
My formula is my little doggy. My little Pomeranian is 2 years old. And I love him, every hair on his body.
And he's
I
very
talk to him. Sometimes I tell him, I'm going to strangle you. And what I do, I hug him. And that is so de-stressing. And going on walks with him every morning, every evening. meeting other people who have dogs and chatting with them, what they are doing. And of course, music and, talking to friends. I have a couple of very good friends. When I was going through this deep depression, they were there for me, and we talked for hours. I didn't go to a psychiatrist or anybody, but just talking to them for sometimes at midnight, they'd call me or I'd call them, and talking to them really helped me to cope with my problems. And so, as you said, talking with friends is very helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I think having a pedicure is better than going to a psychiatrist.
All the psychiatrists are tune us up now.
And might be cheaper as well.
I'm sure it is.
Right.
Yes,
I need to do that myself.
But you were saying about humor. We get the New Yorker magazine, and sometimes I used to when I worked. I had more stress when I worked, actually.
Yeah.
I put those aside, and then if I was really stressed out, I would just go through and read the jokes, which
Yeah.
were absolutely wonderful.
Right.
And that's a good way.
Yeah.
And of course, the breathing, which I think,
Meditation, yeah.
I know with me, one thing I recognized in myself long ago is I would start thinking about something that happened to me in my past and getting all upset about it. Finally, I'd say to myself, "What are you doing? It's past. Cut it out."
Right, exactly.
So that thought stopping, or just
Yeah.
saying, "This is ridiculous. Stop.
Yeah,
Stop it,"
right.
and then just think about something else. Actually,
Yeah.
it takes that recognition
Yeah.
of, because I've known some people that just constantly are going back, older people, over their life and regretting things, and I think, oh dear,
That's
you're
gone.
never going to be happy if you do that.
Yeah.
You just aren't.
Some
You-
people
you-
call that living in the rearview mirror.
Yeah,
yeah,
You're
right.
always
I
looking
like that.
backwards
Yeah.
You
instead
lose
of looking
today.
forward.
You
Forward,
lose
yeah.
the day doing that.
And the present. You lose the
You
present.
lose
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
I think Lee wrote an article on rear view mirror.
I did, but I'm not going to present it.
Yeah. And that was
Okay.
good.
Yeah.
Kate, I want to ask you, you had served when you were pre-retired in various hospitals, and what were some of the stress situations that you observed that were more common? Was it before surgery?
Most of my clinical experience was
Yes, yes.
in community mental health centers, that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
you got people who, many of them with major mental illnesses, acute depression, schizophrenia, that sort of thing. And when you asked me to do this, I was thinking about a client I had, and she had panic attacks and anxiety, and she was doing very well for like a year and a half. We only saw her about maybe once every 2 weeks.
Maintenance.
She got a letter saying she'd been called for jury duty and completely fell apart. So you never know. It's going to be an individual thing for people, what causes stress. And it took us a while to kind of calm her down and say it was just jury duty. Somehow she thought she was being accused of something because she had some problems there with reality. So it's just going to be different with different people.
I call that
and,
a trigger.
Yeah, yeah.
Trigger.
And liking being able to predict what's going to happen, but you really can't in life.
That's
Some
right.
people react more to lesser stress in a greater way than people who say don't have a diagnosed
Yeah,
mental
good
illness.
point. That
So-
brings up something I've been thinking of for a long time, and I don't know if there's been any real research done. Over the age span, we pass through childhood, teenagehood, adulthood, senior citizen, whatever, dum. Is there any correlation in terms of your adjustment from childhood to teenage years and how you deal with stress and cope, that would be a forerunner of how well you adjust to old age?
Well, what's been found is that personality styles stay pretty consistent throughout one's life.
Including the coping mechanisms?
Yeah, so if someone tends to be, quote, a nervous type person, that tends to remain often with them. Now, people find coping mechanisms, or if people have a hard time with change or adjustment, that tends to remain. Now, there's different, of course, circumstances depending upon the phase of life, but it's fairly consistent, it turns out. But fortunately, we can teach people
Yeah.
to handle some of these
Maybe
things.
we need to have a course in adjustment orientation as a required course to get your high school diploma. And unless you learn to adjust well, you don't get that darn diploma.
Yeah.
It'll set you up for
Well-
life if you pass it.
Yeah, well,
Maybe.
there's always change in life, and some people
Yeah.
can flow with it more easily, and some people just have a much more difficult
Yeah.
time with it, for sure.
But even I worked in the nursery. It used to be they said, you know, a baby was like an empty vessel and everything was poured in. No, you could tell the difference in babies.
No way.
Newborn nursery.
sure.
Ask any nurse; they'll tell you there's just differences when you're born, and so certainly going to carry a lot of that through life. And that's where learning how to
Different gene
take care of
pool.
yourself
Yeah.
makes a difference.
That's
yeah.
an interesting
Yeah,
point, I
yeah.
believe. Yeah, because every child is, baby is so different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had two, and both of them were so different from each other.
Yeah, remember
Yeah.
they used to say, well, if a child say was diagnosed with schizophrenia, what did the mother do?
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that child apparently everything that happened to it was environmental, and it just isn't so.
That brings up the question. I assume that several people on the panel are grandparents. They have grandchildren. Now you have to determine, are your grandchildren calmers or stressors in your life, or a little of both?
Well, I have 4 grandchildren,
Go for
and
it.
they're all different. That's the point,
Yeah,
I
that's
think.
right.
You know, some are, I can see, some just seem to be calmer. Some seem to be more active and more energetic.
Energetic, okay.
That kind of thing. So you can really see the difference. I do think it's important to say, though, that although we do have personality styles, each of us, environment does make a difference. And, you know, people who are brought up in a more secure, loving environment certainly react often differently than people who have had a more disruptive environment and a more difficult environment. So,
That's right.
you know, it's not 100% nature or nurture,
no,
but
it's right.
that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Mhm.
That's right.
That's right.
But my grandchildren just bring joy to my life. So
They're lots of fun, aren't they?
they're a lot of fun. That's right.
Once-
They're your what do they say? They're God's reward for not killing your children. Oh, like that one.
Oedipus
Yeah,
complex.
Yes,
something like that.
that's right.
They are.
Okay.
They're very enjoyable.
Yeah. I think we'll follow up the earlier conversation to find out, how does depression relate to stress or anxiety? Is it the flip side? Do they blend together? And is there a correlation, Rob?
Yeah, excessive stress can lead to clinical depression
How so?
frequently. Well, we talked about one of the major sources of stress being loss.
Mm-hmm.
And loss, either unresolved or on a continual basis, can lead to depression, clinical depression. So the other major source of depression is anger, and often anger that's unexpressed, that's kept inside. And I think you already mentioned how your loss led you
Yeah,
to really get
I went
depressed.
through a few of them in my life, and I'm not going to talk about all of them. But sometimes I felt like anger against God. I felt anger against, something. And why me? That comes, why do I have to go through that when I see everybody else's children to be okay? And unfortunately, we had 2 deaths in the family. My daughter lost her husband, and then my son went through all that for 2 years. So it was really very depressing, and I was involved. Sometimes I felt very helpless that I couldn't. When I saw my son losing his memory, and he rapidly lost it. It was not like, years like people go through that. But within 2 or 3 years, he just became completely oblivious of himself. And so I did go through that deep, deep depression. I stopped writing. I couldn't write a word. I'm a writer, but I couldn't do anything. I was angry with everyone. Everything seemed to be just shattered for me. But then, if I didn't have friends, I don't think I could have done that. And then one night, my son was very kind of, he loved to, you know, he played little jokes and stuff like that. And he said, he came to my dream one night after I think it was a year and a half. And he said, Mom, cut it out. I'm okay.
Good for him.
And you need to start doing your thing. You're too resilient. You are too, so something like that. And so next morning I woke up and I felt different, that he was right, that I need to start living again. And that helped.
Yeah.
And so I got to write about him, about things. And writing is
That
also
helped
very
you.
therapeutic.
Sure.
If you
is.
can write and
Right.
you can express yourself on paper, that really got me to be where I am.
I think writing's wonderful, and I
Yeah.
would get very upset about something or someone at work. I would
Yeah.
go home, and if I wrote the whole thing, it's like you take it out of your body and you put
Right,
it on
exactly.
the paper.
Yeah.
Somehow it's almost physical,
Yeah.
and that really helps. And then you can look at it a little more calmly and
Yeah.
decide what you're going to do, if
And you can
anything,
tear it
about
up,
it,
you
or
know.
you can do
Yes.
nothing. Right.
Right,
yeah,
and you
yeah.
can call that person
Yeah.
several names that you wouldn't say, you so and so.
That's
That's
Has
right.
anybody
But
here
you-
done journaling or have friends that have done journaling as a way to relieve stress?
Yeah,
I have never, but I know
yeah.
my
But you're a
daughter.
good
My daughter
writer. I
does.
loved your
My
punchline.
daughter.
The last. You are so
Very
good
talented.
at it.
Sometimes it's something we recommend. It's if people have to do what's comfortable for them.
Yeah.
And if people
Right.
like to do that or find it helpful, it can be a way of sort of just getting the feelings out, as you
Yeah.
said, and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
And for those of us who don't like to write on paper and all, we still have the old-fashioned tape recorder or,
Yeah,
Sure.
right.
or other
There's
type
lots of ways of doing
things,
it.
and you can just
Yeah.
put your thoughts on tape.
Lee, there's another way
What's that?
that what I do sometimes, I have this split personality, I guess, that I sit on one chair and I talk to myself. Then I move to the other chair, that I am somebody else, and
Role
I
play.
talk back.
Mm-hmm.
You shouldn't have, why did you just,
Who wins
Stop
the
it.
debate? Which side of you wins the debate?
And
Some-
that's a therapeutic
It's a
technique.
tie.
Yeah,
sometimes
right.
that we use,
Right.
too.
and
the
sometimes,
empty chair.
on one shoulder, the angel, the other on the devil, as they say.
Oh.
The devil takes over, and sometimes the angel calms me down.
Right.
I do want to add, though, sometimes people get so depressed, and symptoms of depression can include poor sleep,
Yeah.
poor appetite, no energy. Sometimes people do benefit from medication, and that is nothing to be ashamed of or anything along that line.
What
but
kind of medications?
well, antidepressant medication. And
They have a lot of generics out there
more
that
and
aren't,
more.
that aren't too depressive.
That is one.
On your wallet.
Yeah.
Well, some of the generic, can be relatively inexpensive, but it's enough to get people out of that mood, and so that they can begin to do things that can be helpful for them. Because sometimes people get so depressed, they have no energy, no interest, and they're unable to do some of the other things that might be helpful, which we've talked about.
Yeah.
Getting moving, talking with other people, getting out, socializing, those kinds of
Right.
things.
On a future show, I think we'll take up pain management as a topic unto itself, but if we briefly touch on how chronic pain affects depression and anxiety and stress. You want to start, Rob?
Sure. Chronic pain can be debilitating and very limiting. And not only is it preoccupying in the sense that you're thinking about your pain so you can't think about other things, but as I said, it's very limiting in what you can do and what you can't do.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's sort of a cascading effect of you feel just preoccupied with the pain, you feel you can't do what you normally would do,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get more withdrawn, and it just builds on each other. And that can be a problem. And then the other problem is that people start taking medication to deal with the pain, and
Become
sometimes
dependent.
become dependent on it and build up tolerance and need more of it, and that in itself can be a problem as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we really need to stress that depression is treatable. And that's another thing over the course of my professional life changed dramatically. Used to be very limited antidepressant medication. And now there are many antidepressants, and people really do well on them. So I think that rather than sitting and suffering when you can't get a hold of your depression, you really need to seek professional help. And these medications have really, I think, helped a great many people. And yeah.
How about counseling?
Well,
What's the counselor's approach to depression?
well, I mean, that should be, often it's a combination
Yeah.
of, counseling and antidepressants. Because if somebody's on antidepressants, you have to follow them and be sure how they're doing and everything. So they should be
Intended.
combined. Yes.
And in terms of counseling, as I said before, one of the most helpful things is being able to have someone who can listen to you and who can be a neutral party, not be judgmental. And for many people, just airing out their feelings is therapeutic. But there's also a area of counseling called CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is very much what you talked about. It's really realizing how your thinking can be causing depression and how you can change your thinking to be helpful. So that's the cognitive part. And the behavioral part is to be able to do some things and make some changes in your life that can also be very helpful.
Self-talk is one of the
Right. So often the medication and the counseling
Combo.
can combine to really be very helpful.
Let's touch on how anxiety and depression affects marriages. It's
Well,
a biggie.
depression,
Or couplehood.
you don't want to be around a depressed person very long. And so if one spouse is depressive, I think it was going to affect that. That's why it's so important,
Chain
really,
reaction.
to seek help if one is depressed, because I think it can really interfere with the communication between a husband and
Yeah,
wife.
right.
Because people sometimes withdraw and they just don't
And the-
interact
the-
as well.
And the other
those kinds
person
of
said,
things.
what am I doing that this
Exactly,
person's
blame
feeling? What
themselves.
can I do differently? It's, so I could
But the other
see-
side of the coin is sometimes relationships can cause stress and perhaps depression as well.
Yeah.
And
Especially if
long
somebody's
term,
arrogant. I know
well,
such a
long-term chronic relationship problems can wear people down, and that can be addressed as well.
I've noticed, and this is a good place to bring it in, that sometimes the jobs that people have separate them and they're only almost like semi-married. They're part-time mates. And then when retirement comes into effect, they're confronting with each other full times, and it's a whole new era of having to deal with the other personality 24/7, usually 24/7, although some of us try to escape in various ways, as we know. But it's something that even the role of the retirement and marriage could
That's true.
have its show on itself.
Somebody once told me husband and wife should never retire at the same time. They should plan
Collision
it
course.
so- Yeah, right.
Or they should work at the same place either, because too much of it.
A lot of places they won't
Yeah.
allow you to work
Yeah.
together.
You need space in between, you
Right.
know.
Right.
It's a big adjustment.
Yeah.
People, as you point out, haven't spent most of their time together because they've been working or whatever. And now they're
It's a
they're
buffer,
spending
sort of, almost.
a lot of their time or
Yeah.
most of their time together. People often find they need their own space within the living situation, so that at least they can get away and do their own thing a little bit. And that can be helpful. Or maintaining, as you also said, their own interests
Yeah.
and not giving up previous interests that
Right.
they had that are pleasurable
Okay.
for them.
I remember once when we were dealing with teenagers, and I remember, like my husband wanted to deal with it one way, I wanted to deal. Finally, I looked at him and said, they're gonna grow up and leave us, and we're gonna be here, so we better
Make
just
peace.
work out how we're gonna deal with this, because we'll have to deal with each other when they're gone. And I think there's something to that.
Okay.
And a lot of marriages seem to fall apart when the kids leave, because everything's been focused on the children, and I think it's always important through a marriage to keep focusing on each other also.
And the kids also sometimes play parents against
Oh,
each other.
sure. That's fun, right?
That's an old game.
That's right.
Yeah.
What do they say? Teenagers, that's the only psychosis that's considered normal.
Yeah.
That's about
Let me
it.
introduce a timely nuance to this topic. Salem is known for being the state capital. We have a lot of civil servants, government workers here in this town. And I'm wondering if somebody out there listening could have a pre-retirement course, not only on financial management, but marital adjustments as part of the pre-retirement training for retirees. It might make for happier couples, and it might even make for happier employees and happier taxpayers.
Similar to
bargain.
courses people have before they get married. Is that what
That's
you're
right.
saying? So a
Right.
pre-retirement type course.
Yeah.
There
But
are
I-
financial, I think, seminars out there.
Yes, but not so much on the emotional
Right.
Right.
thing,
Exactly.
and that's neglected,
Exactly.
Yeah.
unfortunately. So I want to, we're getting almost ready to close down, not quite yet, but let's talk about the importance of having a social network of supportive friends outside of your spouse or companion, and how they play a part in being someone to listen to, someone to support you, someone to give you alternative ways of not winding up in the gutter, and how friends and confidants really can make a big difference in your life as a stress deterrent.
Absolutely. And it's helpful to have a group of friends who also have similar interests that you can do things with, as well as people who you feel you can trust, you can feel comfortable with. Socialization is essential in the ways that people want to do it. Some people are more social, some people are less social, but it's important to not be completely isolated and to have that social interaction if possible.
Salem has 3 senior centers, Center 50 Plus, off Kubler, and Commercials at the South, Salem Senior Center. Then on Cherry Avenue off Salem Parkway, you have
Kaiser.
the Salem Kaiser
Yeah.
Seniors. So that's a place to socialize.
And
Make new
and,
friends,
and
and
there's
churches
there's
and-
also churches, right, that
Yeah,
have groups
right.
and have
Pinochle groups,
people.
Yeah.
hiking groups, you
Right.
get the exercise,
Yeah.
to Meccadens and so forth.
Right.
So
Always
all
in
of
the
those are
paper, there's like
stressors.
groups that are going birding or something
Birding
like
or
this. You can
something.
join.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
But those
it's a
are
lot.
short-term things that you can do.
Right. Yeah.
But having a
Not-
network of friends is, I think, very important. As I said, I could not have survived if I did not have good support from my friends at a very critical time in my life. I can mention one of them. Her name is Ronnie, and she lost her husband when she was 29 and had only one son. And we've been like this, and we talk. And she is like my mentor. Sometimes she scolds me for doing things that I do impulsively.
Naughty girl.
And constant bonding between friends, like you said, confidants. And we share everything. And that has really helped me to be what I am sitting here. Otherwise, 2 years back, I could not have been here. So,
And
good
we're glad
friends.
it worked out for you.
Yeah, good friends are like what would you say?
They're a
Valuable treasure.
lifeline. They're a lifeline.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good word.
Okay, tell us about your
Well, it
social
brings
network
up,
a little
I moved here just 6 years ago,
bit. Yeah.
and I had lived in Alaska for 35 years. Extremely stressful for me,
Yeah.
really. extremely stressful.
The move was
Uh,
stressful?
Yeah.
And finding new friends.
Yes. Now golf is wonderful in that you have a group, but
What do you
this
play?
writing group is I
Yeah,
think
right.
saved my life.
Where do you
Yeah.
play golf?
And McNary,
Ah,
I live at McNary.
okay.
And so that's good because you can get, but it's hard when you're older because a lot when you're younger you make friends through
Yeah,
your work, through
right.
your kids and the neighborhood, all
Right.
that, and so the golf and that kind of thing is really.
Yeah.
But I've had my closest friends, both died within the last year and a half, and
That's
it's
rough.
been really stressful. I was surprised it was so stressful. But you have people you've known for 40 years, and all of a sudden they're not there anymore. That can be
Big chunk of your
very
life.
hard.
Adopt me as
Very
your
hard.
friend.
Okay.
And then, when we meet in this, there are about mostly 7 or 8 of us in the writing group, we have come to know each other not only from writing, I guess, because what you write, it expresses
Right.
your inner being.
Uh-huh.
But we have become like a close group,
Yeah.
And if we don't see each other, 1 week, it's like,
Where
oh my
are
God,
they? Right.
where is that person?
Yeah.
So those kind of little groups also bond you together, and you can talk about different things.
Right. Right.
Yes, indeed.
Well,
I think you started out by saying, we all have stress, and that's true. It's really how do we deal with the stress.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the
Right.
important thing. We're not going to eliminate stress from our lives, but we
Yeah.
can cope with stress.
Yeah.
And in reality now, there's so many things you can do if you bring yourself to do it. If you're, say, stressed and
Willing.
depressed, you really have to push yourself to get out and just do them, right?
Right.
And because if you read the paper, there's always things in
Yeah,
there
right,
that are going on that you can join, you can volunteer. They always have a whole bunch of things you can volunteer for. So I think those things really help you get out of yourself perhaps a bit and help.
And then if you have friends, it's good to let them sometimes help you instead of harboring about the same old stuff that has happened to you. If you keep on bringing it, that also spoils your new relationships or your new friendships. If you are going to bring that up every time somebody says something, that also hampers the new relationship.
It's been said that if you're feeling bad, it can help you to help someone else feel better.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, yeah. That's true, that's
Okay.
true.
Let me briefly mention that there are a number of support groups in this town. Call up Salem Hospital if you want to find out what exists, or just Google in online stress group for men. I know there's a men's support group that meets over in Building D every other Sunday at 4:30, I believe. And we talk about our private things in our lives, about our relationships and all. And that's very helpful to have other buddies. And of course, it's confidential, and you don't really have to worry about other people spilling the beans. It's top secret and
That's
all.
right.
And finally, I'd like to ask us closing comments as to what advice you would give to future senior citizens out there, and some of them might even be caregivers to their elderly parents. What advice in a minute or less or in 30 seconds or less would you give to the older generation to be? Let's start with Kate.
Well, there's one of my friends who recently died. She was the one, she's 10 years older. So she would tell me what was going to happen. And I remember she once said to me, plan only to do one thing a day, because you forget that physically you can't do what you could do 20 or 30 years ago. And you plan all these
Exactly.
things and then you're exhausted. So I'm still where I can plan a couple of things a day, but I thought she would tell me that. Just don't worry that you're not doing exactly what you did before, because you're not going to be able to. Physically, you're just not. So I think that's important to remember. Yeah.
Okay. Closing comments. 36.
I never took care. Well, I did take care of my mom. She came here for 2 years, but we were so poles apart that completely opposite. That I tried to take care of her, but she didn't appreciate that. So I
Resistance.
don't know too much about taking care of older people, but I know what it is like taking care of somebody who is sick and how much care he needed at that time
Okay.
in my life.
Yeah.
And let me just add, it's never too early to make changes in your life. Don't
Yeah.
wait until you feel like you're retired or whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
Start now.
Good. Okay. Thank you. This is Lee Coyne and the panel here. Thank you, panel, for doing your good job.
Thank you, Lee, for having me
May
on
your
your
next
show.
week be stressful. Like a wear a shirt. Wear a shirt saying, "Don't mess with my stress." And those closing words. Goodbye, Salem. See ya.
Okay. All right.